The town of Farmington. Respecting history, planning the future.
All right, we are actually going to call to order at 6:30 exactly. And if we could have everybody stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. The flag is over here in this corner. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have more chairs in the custodian, so if you want to do an announcement, people.
Okay. A few items before we move on to public comment. A few housekeeping things. There are more chairs coming. Actually, they've just arrived here, so we're going to get some more chairs set up for everybody. I know it's a tight squeeze. Thank you very much for being here and participating. The other thing I do want to mention is it's a little bit hard to see, but there are some refreshments back here as well. If anybody wants coffee or cookies while they're here, please feel free to get up at any time and enjoy those as we move through the meeting. In order to set the stage for the upcoming presentations, there's a few points that I just want to mention. First of all, since we do have a larger group, I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Megan Guerrera. I am the chairperson of the building committee, and that is everybody you see in front of you here is the Farmington High School Building Committee, as well as some of our professional partners as well, CSG Group as our owner's rep, and we do have architecture representation as well at the table tonight. You'll hear a lot more from them later. So a few points before we begin, just to kind of set the stage. So I just want to make sure everybody's aware of what's going to happen in this meeting moving forward. This will be the first set of presentations that we're going to see that will represent conceptual options for the FHS facility. So when I say it's the first set, what we're all going to focus on tonight is just potential options for maintaining the current facility. So hopefully everybody understood that in our communication. There's going to be subsequent meetings beyond this. The next two Wednesdays, will follow and provide more information. So in the dates on those, just so everybody's clear, is next Wednesday, January 15th, you'll see options presented around renovating the facility. And then the following, oh, sorry, is that better? I have a hard time, I feel like I'm keeping my back to everybody. Can I do this? That's better? Okay. I don't want to be rude either, so. And then on January 22nd, is that better? Everybody can hear me? On January 22nd, we'll see that third set of options, which is for the new building. So keep in mind, this is just one piece of the puzzle that we're going to have a conversation on tonight, so please take this information in and understand that there'll be more to follow on conceptual options. As we hear those presentations tonight, the building committee that you see sitting here will be listening to each presentation with evaluation criteria that we have defined in mind. So you'll see people taking notes around that evaluation criteria, and that's what we are going to use when we actually go into discussion later after both presentations have been given. After each presentation, you will also see financial information associated to each one of those conceptual options. So be aware, you'll hear information, and then you'll see numbers and finances right after that associated to that option that was just presented. Does that make sense to everybody so far? And then once the presentations are complete, there will be an additional opportunity for public comment. So you're going to get an opportunity for public comment right after I speak now, and then after the presentations as well, if you choose to stay and listen. So just wanted you to know that you have that opportunity and flexibility to talk when it makes sense in the meeting tonight. So after the presentations, public comment, the committee that you see here at the table will adjourn into executive session for further conversation on what we've heard tonight and the evaluation of the options that we've seen. So we will do that again in adjourning into executive session. At that point, you are certainly free to leave. In executive session, it will just be who you see sitting at the table as far as the building committee is concerned and CSG. I want to make this point very clear to everybody because it's going to be a long meeting and a lot of presentations tonight. When we leave executive session tonight, there will be no recommendation. So it's not that you're going to be waiting for an answer from us when we leave. Again, if you remember, one piece of the puzzle. We will be giving one final recommendation at the end of the process when we've heard all the information. Our goal here is to come up with a comprehensive solution. In order for us to do that, we need all three of those pieces, and we need to hear all that data, all those presentations, and all that financial information in order to do that. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Oh, yeah, there's room back here as well.
And over there.
Do you want me to mention up there or no? Or you could, there's actually room off to the side as well if for people to be able to see. Don't feel like you're going to interrupt me. If people want to move now, go right ahead. I just would rather have people have the opportunity to be able to see.
They can see.
Do you want to mention that?
Do you want me to send them up? I can send them up. Kathy, do you want me to send them upstairs too?
Folks, you may also use the stairs to the second floor. You'll be able to see in the mezzanine.
And there should be chairs.
And there are chairs up there as well, if you'd like to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. The ability to hear what's going on.
Okay. If they sit, they can't see.
Okay,
You can't see if you sit down?
Thank you for bearing with us with logistics here as we try to figure out where everybody can fit, which is a great problem to have. We're happy to have everybody here. So again, just to reiterate, after executive session, when we come out, it will just be basically us coming out of executive session and adjourning the meeting at that time. So I just didn't want people to think that, if you stay, that there would be decision or some sort of motion coming out of that executive session. There will not tonight. So another reminder, or a couple other reminders, the presentation material that you'll see tonight will be available on our website immediately following this meeting. So you do have the opportunity to review this information again online. And please do so, and please make sure we have that information communicated as well in the community for people that could not attend tonight, and that will happen with every meeting moving forward as well. So we will build on that information on the website, so please use that. The other piece to this is, as you can see, is Nutmeg TV is here tonight as well, taping the whole meeting from beginning to end, and that will be available shortly as well. So another resource for people. We want as many people to see these presentations as possible, and so if you could help us with that communication, that would be really helpful. Okay, so that's kind of the order of events here, just to level set everybody. So at this time, I would like to open up for that first opportunity for public comment.
Are we going to the podium?
Yes, please.
I just want to, do I have to be official and say my name?
Name and address.
Patty Picard, 11 Tanglewood Road. There has to be another facility within this town to have these next few meetings. We have the library community room, we have the town community room. There's obviously a lot of people here tonight, and I expect more in the next few weeks. So if this committee would think about moving to another site, I think you might even get more people, especially if you're more central at the community center. Just a recommendation from someone who is trapped in this tiny, small room, and people up there, so.
Hi, I'm Jen Scatromo. I live at 1 Paper Chase Drive. One thing that I would also like this committee to think about is for those parents of elementary school age children who cannot find childcare tonight, perhaps something could be done with NHS at the high school, Mr. Hurwitz, where they could get some of their community service hours to watch some of our elementary school age children and their parents could attend.
Hi, my name is Trish Guglielmo. I live at 22 Michael Drive. These pictures that I have in my hand are actually not for the committee members because you obviously know what's wrong with our high school and what needs to be done. These pictures are for everybody sitting here. These pictures hold what is happening to our high school. And if our kids can't get a great education with a great roof above them to learn in, then there's something missing in this town. It's very sad to have my son stay in an orchestra room with the light above him just waiting to crash down on him. There has to be something done about mold issues. There has to be something done about the lack of handicap accessibility. There's just so many pictures here that I have that I'd like to pass around for each and every one of you, taxpayers, property owners, to preserve your property and to take a look at these pictures and see the need if you have not done the tour. Where should I have these? I'll start here.
Anything additional at this time for public comment? And as I said, remember that.
There's 4 chairs back here if people want.
Oh, there's 4 chairs back in the corner too, if anybody feels that there's need additional room. But remember again, if you do plan on staying for the presentations, you will have another opportunity to speak for public comment based on what you've heard during the presentations as well. In addition, we do want to mention that we did receive online communication from Jay Tulin, so will be available for everybody to read if they would like to, and we will pass that out to the committee as well. It's in addition to the packet that you have, so we'll make sure that everybody gets that. Okay, next order of business is minutes. So can I have a motion to approve the attached December 11th, 2019 minutes?
So moved.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, unanimously approved. Next order of business is correspondence and reports. We actually have quite a few things on the agenda tonight that we're not going to go into detail on, but they are here for public record for people to read. The first is included in our packets is the Farmington Public Schools Enrollment Projections Report for 2029. I don't know, Kathy, if there's anything you want to add to what's in here, or?
I would just say that part of a project like this requires us to do 10-year projections, and we use the highest year's enrollment here at FHS to determine the square footage. So you'll see in that projection that our enrollment here at the high school will go up to 1,404 students in 2029. So that's what is being used as the basis for the square footage for the high school for the various options. So.
And the detail is included in the report as well for people to view, and that will be posted with our meeting minutes if anybody would like to review that. Next item is a letter from the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. People might have heard that as referred to as NEASC, regarding remaining Farmington High School's warning status for standard for accreditation on community resources and learning. This is actually a big reason why we are in this room tonight. So, Scott, is there anything in addition you want to add to what we have here?
No, I think the letter speaks for itself. The committee did acknowledge that they're pleased that we're moving forward with the committee currently, but continue to implore the high school to rectify these issues. We're currently at our 5-year report, so we're going to be submitting that, and then in another 5 years, we'll be under another accreditation review. However, we owe NEASC an update yearly at this point.
Okay. Additionally, what you will find in our packets as well as what will be included in the meetings is a kind of an overview of our 2019 progress to date for this committee. It just does a nice summarization of the work that's been done and some of the big decision points and timelines moving forward. Nothing that I'm going to go through detail in this meeting, but will be available for everybody to review. That was also shared with our new town council as well, so that we are keeping all our the members of the town council aligned and informed of all the efforts. So not only do we have liaisons from this committee that go to town council, obviously, and report back, we're also trying to improve that communication through providing updates like you'll see in this packet as well. In addition, we also did receive communication from Josh Davidson around communication suggestions, so we're reviewing those as part of our communications subcommittee, and those suggestions are included in, will be included in the minutes as well. And we also received communication from John Vibert regarding classroom clusters, and I know that's something that our owners reps are working on to try to come up with a comprehensive response back to John on that. I think he's here. Did I see him? Yeah, there he is. So we're working on that just to kind of we acknowledge we've got it. I know this is a conversation that we've had at other times, but I think we're coming up with some additional information for you on it. So that's out there as well. All right, next order of business, we'll go into new business, and we're actually going into some invoice approvals. So the first is to get a motion to approve the attached invoice for Construction Solutions Group, or CSG, in the amount of $66,834. This is for services rendered to date. The invoice specifically is in the packet, and the committee has reviewed that prior. So can I get a motion to approve?
You want to do all three in one shot? Or do you
We
want to
can.
do one by one?
You want to do that? Yeah. Okay. The next is to approve the attached invoice from QA&M Architecture in the amount of $11,750. And then the third, to approve the attached invoice from TSKP Studio in the amount of $60,000. So again, all for services rendered to date.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? No? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, unanimously approved. Okay, so at this point, we're actually going to go into the main event here. So we're actually going to move into presentations at this point. And we have up first our presentations as QA&M. So they will give the presentation of the maintain options, and then we will follow up with CSG. We'll actually do the financial information. And the format of the presentation, they have 35 minutes to present, and then we'll follow with a very short opportunity for questions as appropriate at that point. So we will have a timer, kind of give you a high sign at the 5-minute mark, and we should be good to go.
Whenever ready?
Ready.
We are ready.
Okay. Well, good evening. It's nice to see such a nice, large crowd here to talk about the school. You know, we're QAM. I'm Rusty Malik from QAM. I'm the principal, one of the principals in the firm. And tonight, what we'll do is we're going to present option one of the Farmington High School projects. Starting out, we want to just establish some of our agenda items here. We've got 3 priorities here, 3 goals. One is to identify and talk about the priorities of this particular option. The second is to share some solutions that we've developed with you. And then the third one is really to go over the criteria that has been established for the project.
Rusty, can we just have you move just a little bit closer to the mic
Okay.
for us? Thank you.
This is going to... So as we look at the RFP guidelines and what's the minimum requirements for this project, they were identified in the RFP. But when we start looking at these projects, we have identified what the needs are. And really, having lived through the school, 8 years of the school, when my kids are going through school here, it was a daunting task. And we said, how are we going to accomplish this? But we spent several weeks looking at all the different options, evaluating this building, and looking at various solutions that we thought at first worked, but then they didn't work because of X, Y, and Z reasons. But ultimately, through a lot of hard work, we believe we've come up with a really strong solution that addresses most of these priorities and provides you with a viable option for Farmington High School. Our goal is to address safety and security, is to address student learning environments, to address things such as circulation, and a lot of the NEASC report that you just heard about, the letter from NEASC, but really to talk about NEASC and how are we going to address those specific issues that NEASC has brought forward. So I'm going to go right into the solution. We're going to walk you through the building as we see it being resolved, and then we'll go into the criteria. Just to give everybody a sense of orientation, Route 4 is down here, Monteith Drive. This is that main parking lot, sort of the southeast corner of the building. And that's really the parent entrance right there. So in our option here, what we did is we said, well, one of the key factors in this any design is going to be safety and security. So our first move here is to take that entrance, which is a parent entrance, and really make that the main entrance to the school. And what I mean by that is to really enhance that space. We're going to talk about how the site operates as also later on, but to really enhance that space, bring the administrative offices to the front of the building there. That's the new main entrance. There'll be a secure vestibule, and so everybody will come through that secure vestibule, monitored by the administrators. There'll be sight lines to anybody coming and approaching the building. So that's the first solution for this particular project. Here's a plan of that same, what I was talking about. You're coming in right here. There's the administrative offices, and you can see a secure vestibule. One of the issues we have with this school is you come into this building and you really don't know where you're going. You're walking around trying to find your way to the auditorium or the gymnasium, especially if you're coming in from this entrance right here. So as we looked at it, we said one of our priorities has to be circulation. What can we do to simplify circulation? In this approach of making the entrance right here at this, the new main entrance, we also opened that space up in a way that it allowed us to have a lobby or something of a lobby, and then the sight lines from that lobby would start to carry you through a very simple circulation path that helps us in wayfinding throughout this building. And more so for the community than the students, because the students don't learn the building. It's the community that's really the one that has to worry about where are we going with this. So when you come in and you entered the building, what you'll see from that lobby is a hallway, and where we're standing on the left side here is this space really right now. And right in front of you will be the media center. So where do a lot of functions occur? In the media center. So it's important that right off from the front entrance, you look right into the media center. Now, from a plan perspective, what you're seeing is we're standing here, we're looking out there are the media center learning commons. Now, one of the key criteria to this plan is addressing NEASC. And the reason I bring that up again and again is the three areas that NEASC really cited us on is the adequacy of the cafeteria, the adequacy of the learning commons space, safety and security, and adequacy of science. So what we've done in this solution is really come up with a way of building a cafeteria in this courtyard, the circular drive, converting the cafeteria to the media center learning commons, and then there'll be a snowball effect of how it improves space throughout the building. So what you can see is we've developed the learning commons area, and that space can look like something like this. We modeled this building, so just to give you that it's a space that has a lot of natural light coming into it, that gives you flexibility of learning and collaboration. Adjacent to the learning commons is the cafeteria. And the cafeteria is a space with lots of natural light. Again, it's another space where students can use, parents and the community can use this space. So it's important to have this space. And another aspect of this particular design is also that right adjacent to that, the cafeteria is a courtyard. Now, so if you envision that that's the circular drive right here, that's where the cafeteria is, and now this becomes an outdoor space. You know, typically in the summers or in the spring and the fall, students are out there. So it's really an extension of the cafeteria. And what we're doing in this process is we're solving a problem that says, okay, by building one cafeteria space, we can now repurpose so many other spaces within the building to be able to meet all our other needs in terms of making the building fully accessible, making it compliant with educational needs, and so on. So what you see here, and what I was pointing to, here's the media center. This is actually sort of a cyber cafe space, sort of an interspace between the two, between the media center and the cafeteria. And then this hallway right here, now it's a new hallway that becomes the connector to what's existing as the main entrance right there, because you can see here's the auditorium, the gymnasium, and that becomes the main connection point right here. So from a circulation point of view, you come into the building, one turn, and now you're right there, down Main Street, where you've got all these spaces that are functioning right off of that area. So, you know, the other thing it does is, for those of us who also know, students cut across to get to their art classrooms, for instance. That's on the 3rd floor. They're coming all the way from the 900 wing, and they're trying to get to the 3rd floor. Try getting there in that short amount of time. So they come out and they cut across. That's a security issue with students coming out. So this solution also allows for an internal connection for all students to be able to move throughout the building. Just come back a second. Sorry. Okay. As you go down this Main Street, you'll see there's music, there's the auditorium. One of the other changes that we made is we put art on the 1st floor. In looking at this building, with all the work that needs to be done to be just code compliant, we're going to be repurposing spaces, and in that process, we've got to use that opportunity to reconfigure the building. So by bringing art down to the 1st floor, once again, what we've done is we've shortened the distance that people have to travel. So art is functioning right there, and the distance and travel distance. Now art begins to become really part of all these core facilities, part of the music and the cafeteria, all the spaces that the students go to quite frequently. Further down is music. The music spaces are made fully accessible so that the depression, the pit for the band room will be filled in. But the idea is to make all of these spaces fully accessible. And then finally, we end up at the auditorium. Now, the auditorium has its own special issues. We all know about the capacity, we know about the accessibility, we know about the acoustics. Our approach in this option really takes the auditorium, renovates it entirely in its existing space. And when I mean renovate, we're not keeping any wall. What we did is an analysis of the structure. The structure of the walls don't need to be, they're not load-bearing, in other words. So we can remove all the structure, create an auditorium that's appropriately designed as a theater space, a venue for performances, and certainly make it fully accessible. So what you see here is an image of a auditorium with aisle seating rather than continental seating. What you have right now is continental seating, and that becomes a problem because of the circulation throughout it. It's fully accessible on the interior. There's a mezzanine level to provide us the appropriate capacity to get up to 725 seats. There's an elevator that's introduced in this option to get to the mezzanine. And actually, that elevator is a dual functioning elevator, because what it does is also provides access to the fitness room, because currently the fitness room is essentially inaccessible. So as we work through the school, we're not only renovating these spaces, but we're making them fully ADA compliant. And finally, the educational component of the building. One of the requirements, or one of the desires, was to have learning communities. What we did, and what happened when we moved the media center, so this space has been repurposed, that gave us the opportunity to create a learning community in this area right here. And what a learning community consists of is classrooms, it consists of breakout rooms, it consists of teacher workrooms, science labs, and that's important because science is one of the areas that we've been cited by NEASC. So by relocating science throughout the building meeting that criteria of learning communities, we are now able to also address the issue of science. So in this solution, you have 4 learning communities here. And I mentioned earlier on how we relocated art, but there's a purpose to that. The other thing that it accomplished is that it allowed us to create 2 learning communities on the 2nd and 3rd floor of the 1928 building. Now that's critical because, you know, one of our big issues in this school is how do you get from one point to the other, and how do you get through the throng of students that's all over the place? You know, everybody seems to be coming to that intersection right there, and it makes it almost impossible to navigate. By dispersing the learning communities around all these core functions, what happens is all of a sudden, instead of 1,200 students trying to come and navigate these hallways, it's just 50%, 700 students are coming through there. And not all 700 even need to come to that point, because there's opportunities to come in different directions to access the cafeteria, to access the media center, to access all these other spaces. So by simply making some adjustments to the existing space and the use of those existing spaces, we've been able to address those particular concerns. And so finally, just giving you an overview, here's the main entrance. We address security at this point. We simplify the circulation. You can see it's a straight shot right there. We've added the cafeteria to address the NEAS concerns, same thing with the learning commons. We've addressed the educational spaces, provided a new auditorium, refurbished the gymnasium and the auditorium, and the locker rooms get fully renovated as well to make them fully ADA compliant and Title IX compliant.
So that's really a summary of our design. My name's Angela Cahill. I'm with the project manager for QA&M Architect. Here you see an image of that cafeteria that was built in infill of your existing circular drive courtyard. You see it adjacent to the 1928 building. As far as the style goes, you know, we're renovating your existing building in this option. We're looking for something that is sympathetic to the existing building, both the 1928 building portion and then all the other portions that have been built over time. So you can see the style that we chose here. It's updated, but yet it correlates to the 1928 building. The next image shows overall a model that we developed, and you can see the entrance area that we renovated on to become the main entrance on the right, and then again that cafeteria piece that'll get inset into your courtyard. So we're really proud of all 3 options that we've developed. We're done with the design of all 3, and you'll see them all this week, next week, and the week after. This particular one sort of surprised us, and we're going to present now the second half of our presentation are the criteria slides, and this is to enable you to really understand how we have met the charge that was in the RFP. Really, we feel we fully met all of the criteria in your matrix, all the categories of your matrix, with the exception of those that you told us to specifically exclude. So we surprised ourselves a little, and we're really proud of that. And then in the following weeks, you'll get to see how our other matrix pans out. So I'll start with matrix 1, and then Rusty and Dave are going to talk about the rest. On each of these criteria slides, you'll see the matrix, the criteria number at the top. And then you'll see all your subcategories either right below that or in the lower left corner. So these 4 subcategories up there address ADA compliance, address security needs, the School Safety Infrastructure Council standards, and the public-private separation and the NEASC. Those were all within your criteria 1. So each of the criteria slides, you'll have those listed for you. This presentation will be left with you to use either electronically during executive session, posted publicly, and also we have printouts of this for you to hand out. So just speaking, we addressed most of these already in the design presentation, but I'll just touch lightly on the ADA compliance and the security. So the ADA compliance, just the previous slide had indicated where we were doing all of those upgrades, those code upgrades. Sort of sprinkled throughout. And then this next slide talks about public-private separation in regards to security. So it's not just the main entrance and moving your office to the main entrance, it's also making sure that facility is secure not only during the day but after hours. The little blue circles indicate all the areas that we can provide lock-offs. So when you're using the facility after hours, you're really securing those learning communities from the public after hours.
So one of the big challenges in this building is going to be, well, how are you going to build this? How are you going to go through this construction process? And that's really is a challenge in any building that's built while it's occupied, while construction is going on while it's occupied. We developed a fairly detailed phasing plan. We're not going to show you all the components of the phasing plan, but needless to say, this was developed and we believe it can be improved upon. Because really when we develop a phasing plan, there's a lot of interaction with the administrators, with the parents, with the construction managers and so on. So we've gone through that process. We've created some spaces that are temporary classrooms within the building rather than bring portables on site. And this has all been vetted and is actually part of the overall estimate as we look at it. The other thing we want to address is really the issue of consolidation of space. Consolidation of space has two main components. One is, how can we make the building address sprawl? Well, you can't address sprawl because your building is what your building is. But just understand that you now have 1,400 students in this building, or will have 1,400 students. But what we can address, and what I mentioned earlier on, is how do we control the congestion within the building, the circulation within the building. And that's, again, an issue of taking what this is an existing floor plan and how things operate right now. Again, we mentioned about the students crossing the courtyard, congestion here, but taking that and addressing it through the learning communities. So we've repurposed spaces and now created a traffic pattern that really resolves those concerns about congestion.
David Quisenberry, principal of QAM Architecture. One of the other big components of this is obviously the upgrade of the systems within the school. We all know the age of this facility and how in need of improvements, actual components of the school are. So we had, as part of our team, we have, Van Zelm Engineers, local Farmington engineer, did extensive designs. I would bore you all to death if I went through that tonight, so it's actually included at the end there if you want to look at it. But be that as it may, one of the things that's important to notice is that we actually went through and completely came up with a redesign of all the systems in the school, taking into account the space that's available to install those systems, utilizing a lot of pipe systems versus duct systems so they could fit within the spaces that we have. But we would end up with a brand new systems to run this, to operate this school with fresh air ventilation, air conditioning throughout the entire facility, high efficiency heating and cooling. We basically, all the electrical and technology components, which have become obsolete just through time, would be upgraded as part of this system. And one of the things that's important to keep in mind, and again, as we've said, we love all three of our schemes, as I'm sure you guys do as well. But relative to some of the things that people talk about with green design and what's really good for the planet in a sense, and one of the things about this initial scheme here, what we call the maintain scheme, is that preserving a facility and finding a way to resurrect this facility for its future use is actually one of the most green things we could do, rather than simply to fill a landfill with the remains of this building. So as far as this particular option, option one, we feel that just simply preserving this building is a pretty green solution. Relative to making this tired facility continue to work for the next century, we are including a lot of envelope upgrades to improve with energy efficiency. It would be a completely new roof on the entire building, entire facility, which would allow us to address insulation as well as leaks into the band room and things like that. It would also, included with this, would be replacing all of the windows in the building except for in the 900 wing, where those windows are fine because that's the newer section. But the rest of the building, the windows could all be replaced. That would help us with energy as well. So we basically created a matrix of all the things that we could address, and it pretty much is everything that we could address. Relative to improving the site, another one of your criteria here, again, on the maintain option, there's a limited amount of change that we're talking about here, but One of the important things that we had to address, right, is the ADA accessibility to the athletic fields. So there's some slight improvements to the athletic fields up there on the hill between the upper, lacrosse fields and the turf field track. We were actually working with our landscape architect. We were able to develop a pathway system of a ramp that is, appropriately sloped to provide an accessible route from the track level up to the upper field. So we were able to accomplish that. And then furthermore, we addressed just some slight changes to the main parking lot to address safety. Was one of the main reasons to do that. As a parent whose daughter occasionally needs to be driven to school when she misses the bus, I'm familiar with how people actually cut through that parking lot as opposed to flowing around to the parent drop-off as they should. So cars are constantly coming out. You have a policeman stationed there to try to keep people from cutting through the parking lot. So what we've done is we've rotated all the parking aisle 90 degrees so that now the parent loop goes around the parking lot and there's no opportunity to cut through the parking lot. When you come up, you follow the road, and that's what you do. The other thing that does is right now there's a very unsafe situation where all the kids getting out of the parking lot kind of randomly run across the parent drop-off roadway. So by reorienting this way, and we've created actually a landscape buffer, potentially with a small wall or something between the drop-off aisle and the parking lot, what we're doing is we're collecting all the pedestrians out of the parking lot to a common boulevard, pedestrian boulevard, aligned with the new main entrance to the school, and having them cross in a safe manner at the one location rather than just sort of crossing wherever they feel like crossing. As far as the benefits to the community, I mean, any project that we do on this school isn't just for the students, and it certainly isn't just for the teachers and the administration. It's for the entire community. We're all going to pay for this project, no matter which one we choose. There has to be some sort of improvement for us as a community. So in this case, even though this is the sort of what we'll call the most basic scheme that we're presenting in this series of presentations, we feel that this scheme that we've developed on the maintain option has thoroughly renovated and enhanced all the main public spaces. Obviously, the auditorium that we talked about will now be a first-class auditorium where we could hold music events beyond just student events. We could have the Farmington Valley Symphony Orchestra and events like that take place if we really had a first-class auditorium. The media center that we're in now, as you can see, is tired and cramped. By addressing that, that's another commonly used public space that now is easier to get to and is a much nicer, brighter space. The cafeteria isn't used just as a cafeteria. The cafeteria is used for a lot of other community activities, and now it also would be a showcase space. And then furthermore, just the way we address the circulation and the lockdown, it makes it so much easier for this school to operate as a community facility in the after hours time that we have. And again, I think this is maybe one of your final sort of scoring criteria here, was just sort of fit and feel for the town. Obviously, as we discussed, this is kind of a mild renovation to the outside. The only real addition is the entrance and the cafeteria. So we've really designed that area to just kind of blend in with what's there. I know it's not exactly award-winning architecture that we're in right now, but the reality is what we've done is we've chosen to create an addition which really hopefully pulls some of the pieces together, and doesn't attempt to stand out as some kind of a sore thumb. All the spaces, we feel are appropriate. They're modern, but they're not too bold that some people would find them offensive. Erica, one of the interior designers that worked for me, put together these finish boards that we're going to leave here for you to see, that demonstrate the types of materials that would be in all the different spaces within the school, so you can kind of see and touch. You could actually come up and touch and see the finishes. Everything is labeled as to where it would go. With the auditorium, again, with a mezzanine, we can effectively accommodate the capacity that we need, and obviously it would be a completely modern acoustically and, with all of its finishes. And then the one final thing that we threw in here just, certainly wasn't something you necessarily were looking for, but again, based on our personal knowledge and our personal experience with this facility, were some things that we really felt should be addressed. They could be addressed as part of this project. Quite honestly, we've met with the town, and they could address them independently of this project, but is basically related to access on and off this property. I spent a long time speaking with people from the Farmington Police Department, and they expressed a real concern with the way this property is set up with only one access point. If a tree were to go down across Monteith Drive, everybody's trapped, either trapped off the property, trapped on the property, whatever. So there's a couple things that we addressed, just simply to throw them out there for ideas. One of the things that we addressed, and we did a lot of research on to determine that it's feasible, is that the town of Farmington owns the land between the auditorium parking lot and Highwood Drive. There's a section of land there between the houses on the lower section and the houses in the neighborhood up above. That land is, again, it's town land, it's available. We worked with our engineers and determined that it is feasible to construct a roadway through there, whether that's a roadway that's open or whether it's there for emergency access with a gate. That's something that could be determined in the future, but the construction of that roadway itself is a feasible option, right? All these things are optional. And then the other option is relative to some improvements with Monteith Drive itself. Again, as I mentioned, dropping off a child at school, you realize that what happens is people get backed up at the stoplight there. The vast majority of people at that time in the morning actually want to just turn right and go up Monteith Drive. But if people are just stuck at the traffic light, you have no option to do that. So what we're demonstrating down here in the bottom is that we would actually create a dedicated right turn lane across Route 4, and that would allow cars that wanted to go to the high school or the town hall or the library to basically move over into the right lane, come to the intersection. There would either be a green arrow there, or if nobody was coming, they could go right turn on red. But at least it would allow cars to get by the cars that were stopped at the light. These, as I said, and then furthermore, Monteith Drive. A lot of people think it's 4 lanes. In my discussion with the police department, they said that's a big myth going on, and there's been a lot of accidents where people get run off the road or sideswiped and say, "Why'd you come into my lane?" And the person says, "Well, it's not actually a lane. It's only one lane." We've kind of painted it like 2 lanes at the bottom to make it work, but it's not really a 4-lane road. So we were proposing to actually correct that situation. And again, these are things the town could address at any time. We feel like it's prudent if you're going to do a major high school project, whichever scheme you choose, something like this would be worth doing at that time. They're priced, when CSG goes over the prices, we made sure that all of this work is priced separately because it's not in any way necessary for any of these schemes. We just feel that it's something that should be discussed by the town and by the committee as to whether they make these improvements.
Yeah, actually, the budget that you'll present will include these improvements, so it's more of a
deduct, yeah, if you
deduct
don't
from
do them.
the budget. So the Monteith Drive is roughly estimated about $1 million for those improvements, and the access road at about $500,000. So they're not inexpensive solutions, but they're lasting solutions that could really enhance the site.
So finally, in kind of closing our presentation here of our scheme here now, basically just to kind of sum up that, one of the things that we looked at was the title, the official title of this option 1 is to maintain the existing high school. And the intent of that option title means we got to work with what's here. But nobody would maintain a building that was failing so badly as this facility is. So what we viewed it as is work with the existing building, work with everything that we can work with, but really reinvigorate this high school. It's not a maintenance option. This is, if you want, if the choice at the end of this month of all the 6 options you see is to go with our option 1, you know that option has to last you for decades, right? I mean, it's not a solution that you can choose if you don't think it solves your problems. And so we really take it very seriously that this is a reimagining of this facility. As far as our solution, we feel like we've really kind of gone through, and we've pretty much accomplished what could be accomplished, with this facility and with the minor additions that we've added onto the building. And then, so in that sense, we feel that it's a very efficient solution, utilizing everything that we could utilize. It's an effective solution in that it does solve as much as we can solve. And then finally, it's a responsible solution in that it's responsive to your needs. Okay? You can interpret the word responsible in a lot of ways, but a responsible solution is a solution that responds to the needs of the community and the needs that were laid out to the design team to solve, and we feel that we've responded to those needs. So thank you very much.
So before the cost, we're just going to hand out the presentation, as I mentioned, and also leave you with, this is the estimating package. This is the roll of drawings and the project manual that was used to develop the cost that you're about to see.
Thank you. Oh, thank
Is there a clicker? Yeah, I know. All right, good evening, everybody. My name is Mark Arilli, and I work with Construction Solutions Group. And we're here, part of our task and why, as owners representation, we have been tasked with the cost estimating for all of these concepts for both design teams. So we have, in our team, we have cost estimators that work directly with the architectural teams. They've been working very hard over the past few weeks, reconciling these numbers and getting them to where they agree these numbers come in. So without further ado, the presentation that you just saw, in an effort to keep this to a minimum, we've sort of rolled up some of the main costs in these. So you're not going to see all of the costs associated with construction, et cetera, but I'll walk you through them best I can. So the architectural design fees for this option is $3,500,000, and the numbers there represent the fees that were presented by QA&M. These dollars would essentially, if QA&M were selected with this particular option, these are the dollars that would carry through the rest of the projects, through schematics, through the final design, through referendum, and on through construction. So keep that in mind. The professional fees that go along with that, just under $3 million. What makes up those professional fees are things like the project management fees, the commissioning, special inspections. We have allowances in there that cover any of the hazardous material inspections, testing, the state permit fees, moving services, legal fees, bond or origination fees. All of those things roll up into those professional fees that need to be accounted for. Again, that would carry through the entire project if this option were selected. The construction costs there, the $83.3 million, represent the base construction costs to build all of what you saw there, including a design contingency. So remember, we're in conceptual design phase, so there is a contingency that's carried for this process, so that as we roll into schematics, et cetera, you hope that that number would not all be spent at that time. Same thing with construction contingencies. We're in concept. So as we get through schematics and through the rest of the project, we may find that as the design might be tweaked, the construction costs might change, and we would utilize those construction contingency costs. Also in that is an escalation fee. And so the escalation fee basically takes the duration of the project and it projects out any escalated costs. So what things may cost today may cost more, or most likely will cost more in the years ahead. So if we're going to start in 2021 and into 2022, you'll see that those we need to carry an escalation costs that come along with that. The FF&E, so the furniture, equipment, and technology costs, just under $3 million there, $2.7 million. That is dollars that we're assuming about 50% for this particular phase. About 50% of that furniture would be replaced in this particular maintain option. So you'll see that number change in the weeks ahead as we go through a renovate as new and a new construction project. You'll see tonight that in both of these cost estimates, that same exact number is carried for both schemes. There is next to 5% owner's contingency, so just under $5 million. The owner's contingency cost is there again to carry through any of the items that we haven't been accounted for in this conceptual phase. So that rolls you up to a total project cost for this particular, for QA&M's conceptual design for just under 100,000. So just under 100 million. $99,140,353. Bear in mind, that's all of those costs that roll into that total project cost. The next sheet is a cost criteria matrix that the committee had worked hard to put together. You see here QA&M's numbers are plugged in to option 1. And so that number that we just reflected, that $99,140,353, is rolled into that top number, that total project costs. The next item is less state reimbursement of eligible costs. So when approaching the state for reimbursement, not the entire project would never be considered for eligible in this CIP option. So there is the way that we worked with each design firm to look at the eligible items or what they felt would be eligible for reimbursement in their scheme. And this adds up to just about 60% that QA&M had come up with items that they felt in their option would be approachable to the state to identify. And then you take that 60% and 30% of those dollars is what would be reimbursable. And that's what that $17.8 million represents. So if you're looking at the total project costs, less what the design team feels are eligible reimbursable dollars, you come up with a net project cost of $81,295,089. So the next line there is additional capital expenditures over 20 years. So if their current maintain option had included any things that might be deferred, we would have put a dollar figure there. What you saw tonight did not identify any of those, so that figure for QA&M rests at 0. I'm going to leave it to Kat now to talk about the tax and town implications. Thank you.
So for this option, the tax impact to the average home assessed at $226,777 is $401.31 in year 1, and costs will decrease by approximately $7.60 per year over 20 years. And I know it's hard to see for those in the back, so this will be posted again immediately after the meeting. Thank you.
So we're going to take about 10 minutes to open up any questions to the design team from the committee. So committee members, if you have any questions for the design team.
I'd like to know what the total, I'd like to know what the total square footage would be with the additions to the school.
Jenna, you want to take the podium?
So we're at about 222,000 square feet existing.
Yes.
The cafeteria addition and the addition for the administrative offices in the range of 16,000 square feet.
That's in addition to.
Addition to, yes.
Thank you.
I think it's 16. 222 is, I believe, the existing, or is it 218? I'm sorry, it's 218. It's 218.
Yeah,
And we're adding,
16, and we're adding-
yeah.
And then we're adding 16,000
Yeah.
additional.
Right,
Thank you.
sure.
As
Rusty, oh,
as
go
a
ahead.
follow-up, because that was part of my question, that 218, does that satisfy the 1404 enrollment that is projected?
The overall, based on the 1404, the 218 is actually under the space standards, so the 16 will be within that space standard.
16 will.
I think it comes to total as 240, 238 or 240 is the allowable.
Okay.
In that- 238, right?
38 allowable, okay.
238.
And then, as far as phasing in
Yeah.
when you were looking at your phasing plan, I know we didn't have time to get into detail, but do you know how many years it would take projected?
Oh, yeah, we actually had a detailed plan, and we projected it out 4 years, actually. And that's because we took small bites of the apple. We didn't want to minimize disruption to the school. It really, in our opinion, if we were to have the dialogue with the administrators and say, is more space available for as swing space, and what can we do to sort of overlap some of the spaces, maybe have one less instructional space to make it into a swing space. One option. The other option is to look at assigning maybe 10-hour shifts every day or 12-hour shifts. Every day that we reduce in the completion of this job is money saved, and be calculated at over $100,000 a month would be saved just from this construction manager's costs, not to mention anything else. So there's various strategies that we can use to bring that number down, and also we believe that we can probably cut 6 months, maybe 8 months out of this schedule.
Okay.
And Johnny, the full phasing plan is in that roll of drawings.
Okay.
So this was very difficult to present, the comprehensiveness that we've developed over the last few months in 30 minutes, but I'd advise you to take a look at that. And we can provide that electronically. That's been provided to CSG and the estimator electronically. So if the committee wants to see in great detail our phasing plan, it's there.
Understood. I'm just trying to get the bullet points out for the committee and the public here. On your parking plan, you guys rotated everything pretty much traffic flow 90 degrees. Did you lose or gain any parking when you guys configured it? Did you count the spaces?
I believe there was a minimal gain, but that's to the, yeah.
Okay. So follow up to that, with bringing the administration up there, would that basically be a net zero? I mean, would you be taking up those spaces with the
So,
moving of the administration?
if you recall, we were told that in this option,
Okay.
there was no Board of Ed, there's no alternative education. So those spaces are not accounted for in this option.
Okay, last question. In your concept, you use the auxiliary gym to put some classrooms temporarily to kind of move and shift things around. As far as construction staging, would you be using any of the fields or any of the areas of the parking lot during construction that, basically as far as
We looked at various options. One is sort of the back parking lot by the auditorium, but we also looked at maybe the space adjacent to the library as a staging area, just because the major addition is right there in the courtyard. So that's really we've thought about it. We believe that we would either create more parking down by the library and use the parking lot in the back, or vice versa. So that was the thinking for this construction staging.
Right. And so the design of the alternate for the side road access, one of the primary uses of that could be construction vehicle entrance. And you'll see that probably again in another future scheme. But again, that's just an option. There are a lot of different ways to do logistics, but that could be one of the benefits of a secondary access.
Okay, and then I lied, one more question. As far as when you're renovating these areas, the auditorium, how long do you think the auditorium will be down? How long would the gym be down? Because these are going to affect some of the curriculum things. So, obviously, what do we expect would be the most disturbance in any of the curriculums? Or the auxiliary things?
The auxiliary gym functions as a temporary classroom spaces, so that'll be offline for extended period of time. The renovations in the main gym are really more code related. We replaced the bleachers, we refinished the floors, we did the lighting and all the mechanicals in there. So the shell is good, but in this approach, we really created a new gym, but we didn't demolish any walls or do anything like that. So that work is a relatively short period of disruption to the school. The auditorium, we're creating a new auditorium. That's just the reality of it. So we're looking at a good 8 to 12 months. So you lose 1 year of use of the auditorium, but any option where we're renovating that space to that extent will require that.
Okay. No more questions.
Rusty, thanks for your presentation. I just had a question. You alluded to the capacity of the auditorium in this model. Can you speak to the capacity? Do you have an idea of the capacity for other spaces, the learning commons, the cafeteria? I'm thinking programmatically for the cafeteria and the amount of lunch waves we'll have to offer in this new design, which impacts our current schedule. And then the capacity of the gymnasium. Is there any change in the capacity of the gymnasium with your plan?
So the gymnasium did not change in terms of capacity. It stayed where it is. But actually, if you recall, the latest ed spec actually reduced the requirements for physical education. So we meet those reduced requirements of the latest ed spec. As far as the cafeteria and the media center, they meet the space requirements that were outlined in the educational specifications.
Thank you.
I should mention, there was some change in criteria of additional classrooms added after this option had been submitted. And we don't, obviously those classrooms are not included in this design, but we have looked at the plans and we have actually resolved how those could be added into the plan as well.
I have one more question, Rusty. You guys mentioned the circulation and how you improved the circulation. I'm a little skeptical on how this plan is going to really help getting from this end all the way over to the art building. I mean, we're gonna save a little bit of time by not going up the stairs, as you mentioned, going to the first floor. Can you maybe be a little bit further? Did you guys go into travel, distances and time and all that stuff?
So it's a combination of distance traveled, but it's also how many students are trying to navigate that hallway at the same time. That's really one of the major impacts. And the other thing that really works for that hallway, that connection, is the security aspect of it. The students aren't trying to cut out of the building and go into the courtyard to get to the art wing. This really keeps all the circulation internal. The other thing is, if you recall, we now have 2 learning communities right above that art wing. So there's that many students who may be going to art that don't have any travel time. Or the learning community that's being developed in this space. Those travel times are reduced. So when you're working with an existing building, it's an art of, how do you compromise and make things work? You improve them. Would I say it's absolutely the best scenario? No, but it certainly improves it for at least 50% of the population, and hence, with the congestion reduced, it improves it for everybody.
A couple of questions. So back on timing, the report identifies that phases 1 and 2 happen between June of 21 and July of 22, but you're indicating 4 years. What are the years you're talking about?
From the start of the construction phase to the end of it. I don't have the detailed report in front of me. Now, I use that as the starting point. We had to pick a date, and so those dates are the start and finish dates of each of those.
So there's something that would go beyond phase 2 that would take us beyond July of 2022?
Right. There's about 8 or 10 phases to the project. We just identified phase 1. Okay. There's a diagram for each phase that's in the documents.
We're seeing tonight's scheme. Is there a way that you might be able to share with us how you believe this scheme differs from the other 2 that will be offered in terms of years of impact from a construction?
Yeah, we've got a whole phasing option for the second option as well, and there'll be one for the third option as well.
Can you give us a sense of how they compare?
The Renovate is new, is about 6 months or 8 months less. Again, the challenges with developing a phasing plan in isolation without any input from some of the key players is it never happens that way. Yeah. The reality is we sit down, we work all these details out because there are some assumptions that we're making that, Kathy may say, go fly a kite, we're not going to do that. Yeah. So the bottom line is we've tried to be as conservative as possible. That's why we didn't come up with an aggressive. I could have just said, okay, it'll take 24 months.
Right.
How are we going to question it?
So the majority of that time is happening during summer vacations, and to the extent
there's work that's going on throughout the year. So what we looked at is how is the mechanical going to tie in with this renovation? How is the contractor is going to access that part of the building? And what that time frame is? All those factors are considered in the phasing plan. What's not, and then we've created that initial swing space. So when we create the administrative offices in the front of the building, that frees up the administrative office space as well. So those spaces are now classrooms. The gymnasium is used as classrooms. So all of a sudden we've got somewhere in the range of 8 to 12 classrooms that are available to us, or instructional spaces. So that's a starting point. So we know that we can now move the renovation around and displace up to that many programs so that the renovation can occur. But that has to be factored in because it doesn't necessarily follow through in that manner, because there are some times when it's only going to be 8 rooms just because of the amount of work you can accomplish.
So next question is on how did you determine the scale of the learning communities? So we have 6 different learning communities. How did you arrive at the scale of those?
We try to follow the ed specs. Okay. Those are defined in the ed specs. Now, I will say that we're working with existing spaces. So if you said 825 and the existing space is 810, we weren't going to change that space.
Is there a design, so the alternative high school would be not included in this space?
No, we were asked not to.
Okay. The number of entrances and exits, how does that change in this plan from the existing plan?
So currently, I look at it, the school has 3 major entrances. One where the administrative offices are currently, one's community entrance, and then the one right here. So it really ends up being 2 access points. But in my mind, it's really 1 access point because you don't have a control point at the entrance by the parking lot up here. So once that plan is implemented, everybody will be coming through that secure vestibule. The only people that are going to come into the building from what's referred to as the community entrance would be the students that pick up and drop off, and the students are coming through there. The rest of the time, that part of the building is really locked off. The other thing we've done in our concept is There are some spaces where there's hallways, for instance, is it the 700 wing where the sign slabs are, and there's a hallway in two directions, or even where the tech ed is. We've diverted the circulation in a way that you only need one exit there. You don't need both those exits. So we've captured that space for program space and reduced that as an egress point. Also, the space by the cafeteria, that's all, the only exiting out of there is monitored emergency egress.
So in terms of how many, do you have a sense of what's the net loss of entrances or exits?
So I'd like to say there's one major reduction because of the access point at the main entrance, and I believe there's 5 or 6 additional.
All those other ancillary ones get reduced. Okay.
Yeah.
And in terms of feedback that we may have received, I don't know if we've gotten any of this from the state agency that would be responsible for reimbursement. And I know you've come up with some assumptions on the level of reimbursement, and that may be you all versus them as well.
No, it's us all.
Yeah, us all. The last bit of feedback that we got when the gentleman who leads that agency came to speak to the town, he seemed to forecast a grim picture for a maintained project. Do we have a sense that how do we rely upon the integrity of that figure? Do we believe that that agency would be supportive of a maintained plan?
So if I were to categorize this particular project, I would categorize it as an additions and alterations project.
Okay.
And in an additions and all, and I've done this now for 40 years, so I know the regulations that dictate what's eligible for reimbursement and what's not eligible, and that's what I'm following.
Gotcha.
If an individual at the state says, well, I don't think it's the right solution for you, that's a whole different matter.
Gotcha.
But from the criteria that's identified in the regulations, that's the way we approached it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
So Rusty, one of the big drivers of our criteria is sprawl. And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I know you use the word circulation. So can we, I don't know if you can say, but in other options coming forward, will we hear about sprawl, or do you use the term circulation because this option really doesn't address sprawl?
I think I said right in the presentation that we can't change the building, so the sprawl is the sprawl. That's just the nature of what we're dealing with in this particular option. Yes, the other options will certainly make the building more compact, and that helps in the footprint of the building. This really doesn't change the overall footprint of this building. So the only thing you can address is the circulation and how you address that circulation and how it functions. But the sprawl of this is not an issue that we can change on this project.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anything else?
I don't have a question for these all, but just a question on some of the on the cost side. And if you want us to address those questions now or hold them.
Yeah, why don't we hold them for now, and then what we'd like to do, I think at this point, just because we have another presentation to come, is just give everybody just a 5-minute opportunity. If you need to use the restroom, we're going to do a transition here anyway, so please feel free to get up, stretch your legs. There's coffee in the back. Sorry, I keep forgetting about the microphone. But stand up. We've got another presentation coming. As I said, use the restroom, whatever you need to do as we do this transition. But thank you very much. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.
Okay, hopefully everybody had a chance to kind of stretch their legs, get a cup of coffee, chat a little bit, say hi to friends, and we're ready now to proceed with our second presentation, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. My name is Richard Zipek. I'm an architect and a partner with TSKP Studio in Hartford, and with me this evening is Michael Scott. Michael is also a senior architect. He's been working with me very closely on this first option, and actually on the other options as well, which you will see in the coming weeks. I will tell you, this has been very illuminating for me. And I congratulate Rusty and the QA&M team for doing a lot of work in a relatively short period of time. And this is only one of 3 options that they are developing. And this is only one of 3 options that we're developing. After seeing QA&M's proposal, I'm thinking you're not going to vote for our proposal. Because our approach was a little bit different. And we got very hung up on the word maintain. So I think seeing both approaches for the committee will be extremely useful. So why don't we begin? This is obviously an aerial shot of your high school facility, your campus. A lot of people worked on this. It's in addition to the 2 of us. We have a number of designers in the office who worked on it. And we have consultants. Working with us is Kohler Ronan Consulting Engineers. They did all of the MEP, fire protection, IT system evaluation. We have Michael Horton Associates, a structural engineer, and Mylona McBroom. They are doing the civil engineering and the landscape architecture components. So what we've done is compiled all of the work that everyone has done into this very brief 30-minute presentation. A copy of this presentation is distributed to members of the committee so that you could follow along, because it may be difficult to read some of the text here. So you already know by this point that we're preparing 3 options for the Farmington High School proposal, and tonight we're going to focus on just on option 1. And as I said earlier, we were very hung up on the word maintain. What does maintain really mean? So we kept coming back, or I kept coming back to the analogy of maintaining an automobile. You've heard it before. If you maintain your automobile, you can drive your car for many, many years, right? This gentleman, Irv Gordon, bought a Volvo and drove it for 3.2 million miles. He maintained that car beautifully. He replaced parts. He had parts rebuilt. In fact, that car outlived Irv. You still can drive that car, but he can't. So do I think that Farmington High School is driving a sporty sports car like that? No, of course not. What we're talking about is building. And I did not take this picture. I captured this picture from previous reports and other material that I've seen in town. And this was cleverly done by the photographer as though he had blinders on. And he didn't see the rest of all of the buildings that you have on your campus. But it's an image that sticks in everybody's mind as to what Farmington High School is. And maintaining a building is a little bit different. So no, I don't think you have a red sports car. What I think you have is a solid, American-made Plymouth Fury. This is a real workhorse of a vehicle. It's a vehicle that is bulletproof. A lot of municipalities use this kind of vehicle. You can find it on police departments, taxi cabs. And in fact, this gentleman drove this car for 1.6 million miles before it was hit by a truck. But it's more than just that one vintage vehicle. You are surrounded by buildings that were added. You have, what, 5 or 6 vintage vehicles surrounding this one gem of a vehicle. And what you really have is something like this. You have this potentially beautiful restored vehicle if you spend enough money on it, but then you also have additions that are incompatible placed on it because you ran out of room. And so in the maintain option, what do? Do you maintain it that way, or do you start taking it apart and rebuilding it? Our approach is, let's do maintain only. And so what we did is we looked at your existing building. We went through it several times. We prepared drawings. We prepared narratives for the cost estimator that was brought in by CS&G. We did a complete analysis of the existing building. This looks very familiar, right? You know that the original 1928 building is here, that it has 3 stories, and it's surrounded by all of these other buildings. The 900 wing, which is the most recent one, is here. We prepared drawings that looked like this, that illustrated exterior elevations, floor plans. Those were sent to the cost estimator, accompanied by these kinds of narratives that describe very carefully what you're demolishing in each component of the building and what we're building back, the framing, partitions, thermal moisture, doors and windows and so on, all very carefully described. And the cost estimator came back with a very detailed cost estimate that was broken down into various components. And this is a typical way a cost estimator will do it. He broke it down by trade. So much for concrete, so much for steel, so much for mechanical systems, and so on. And I find that kind of information very difficult to convey to a building committee or to members of the public as to where the money really is going. How do you understand this? And so what I decided to do is take that total, and I'm disclosing what CS&G is going to present later. And they're going to say, this is the total of our project, our option. It's only $49.9 million. What a bargain. Okay, but let's really look under the hood and let's see what's really in this $49.9 million. What we did is look at your statement of needs, which broke it down into these requirements. This should be familiar to the committee. It may not be that familiar to members of the public, although it's available on your website. They should have become familiar with it. We know that you were cited for accessibility and accreditation by NEASC. We know that you have security compliance issues that you need to address. We know that you have a sprawling issue that you need to address, that you have an educational program requirement, and that you have building envelope, energy, and code compliance from an energy standpoint, from an energy conservation standpoint issue. So if I were to take the cost estimator's cost estimate, took those numbers from steel and electrical and so on, and tried to plug in where that $49.9 million goes, you'll see something that looks like this. $4.3 million is spent to meet ADA and NEASC accreditation. A little over $8 million is spent for security. I spent no money on fixing sprawling layout. I can't in this building. $11.1 million is spent on educational programming, trying to satisfy some, and it's only certain selected areas. It's not the whole building. And then $26.4 million on energy and mechanical systems. Or well, I'll get into that in a minute, but looking further, in the interest of full disclosure, that $49.9 million does not address field house parity, which you are doing by scheduling. So we spent no money on any kind of physical improvements in that area, or installing air conditioning throughout, or adding more science areas. We also are not inserting the Board of Education into your facility. We did not put the alternate high school in the space. We're not creating new collaborative space. We're not having robotics or special ed or additional science labs. So we are not doing a lot of things. We are replacing some roofs, which I'll show you, but not 100% of the roofs. We're saving the roofs that are most recent because they still have quite a bit of life left. If I were to take that same $49.9 million and distribute it throughout this whole complex, you'll see that in the 1928 building alone, we're spending $5.3 million. And a lot of that is spent on roof, exterior, mechanical systems, just to get that building preserved and looking good again. $5.3 million. We're spending $8 million in the auditorium, and that includes an alternate that we've included to add a mezzanine, a balcony, in order to get that seating. So in that one selected area where we're trying to increase the seating capacity, because that's what the ed spec is requesting, we're addressing it there. Music areas, 1.3 million. Gym, 3 million to make it accessible. Locker areas, and Michael will talk a little bit about that in more detail a little bit later. But as you can see, and you can look at the printout, how that $49.9 million is allocated. Now, I know you prepared a score sheet using your statement of needs, and you categorized it here in 1, 2, 3, 4, and you created 5, 6, 7, and 8. So in addition to these 4, you added site improvements, benefits to the community, fit and feel for Farmington, and cost. So I know you have this score sheet that you're going to be scoring. So to help me make this presentation, I really stuck my neck out, and I said, I'm going to fill out this score sheet. Now, this is my opinion, okay? This is my opinion. You have a number of committee members who will have their own opinion, who will do their own scoring, but it helps me organize our presentation this evening. So let's do this one step at a time. The first is meeting local, state, and federal requirements. We meet all of those requirements. We meet ADA requirements. We meet the NEASC requirements. And so in my opinion, we believe that this should be a 4. There isn't anything that we have left out as far as the ADA is concerned. And you may recall that I said we're spending flipping the pages, $4.3 million doing that. The second line item is addressing security needs. And we do address all the security needs. We are creating a Sally Port, new entryway, a secure way that has bullet-resistant glazing. We're adding impact-resistant film to all of the windows on the exterior of the building. We're adding security systems at each and every location. You have a lot of exterior door locations, so we're adding money to make those doors monitored, centrally monitored, and we're spending over $8 million, a little over $8 million, meeting those kinds of security requirements. We're also doing work on the site to improve security there, and Michael will walk us through the site features. Public-private separation. There's very little that we can do about that. We have the existing footprint here shown on the bottom. You have public areas here that are shown in yellow. Those are embedded within the footprint of the building. So to get to those public spaces, you have to go through the building, through the school facility to do that. So I scored 2, no change. You may score differently. I label this my opinion, RS opinion. So that's my score, but you may do it differently. And then the last item in this first section is addresses NEASC requirements. I gave that a 4 because we fully address all of those. Okay, programmatic needs, starting first with education disruption. Now, we did do an analysis of the construction duration that it would take to do this project, and we are estimating the construction duration to be 27 months. We would need 3 summers to accomplish this work. So the first summer would be in the year 2022, after roughly a year of planning the project, after approval by the town for funding, of course. And then starting in the summer of 2022, continuing through the academic years until the completion in 2024. And a lot of the estimating that was done by the construction folks targeted the midpoint of construction, which is approximately here, the midpoint of 2023, as the number that is the escalation number. So, and that's pretty traditional in cost estimating for construction. You escalate today's budget, today's costs, to the midpoint of construction. So that's built in to these numbers already. I gave this a 1. Of all the three options we're going to be looking at, this one is the most disruptive because you're hopscotching around the footprint, you're moving pupils out of the way, you're creating swing space outside the footprint of the building, and then all of that shuffling around makes this the most disruptive. Ideally, you would send all the students to Europe and then call them when we're done, and they would come back. The second item here is satisfies ed specs. I gave this a 3. You may choose a 2. I don't think we can achieve your ed specs here because your ed specs call for roughly 271,000. This is, I think, from an earlier iteration. I'm not sure where we finally landed, but I think it was around, it's close. So it's roughly 271,000 is your target. The existing building is only 218,000 square feet. So in the maintain option, in my definition of the maintain option, maintaining the existing building, this is not achievable. So you may choose to score less than a 3. Address undersized learning spaces, cafeteria, gym, media center, and performing arts. I gave this a 4 because in those selected areas, the cafeteria capacity we are able to increase within the footprint of the existing building. I think we talked once in an executive session how we were going to propose demolishing a portion of the corner of the building, of the cafeteria area, and then we did a table analysis showing that we could increase the seating capacity quite easily.
That gets you to a third of your population. So that gets you to 3 lunch breaks.
The gym, media center, and performing arts are going to be improved. Michael will talk a little bit about that later, but I do think in that particular line item we should score a 4. The other 2 items we don't score very well at all. We don't create flexible and collaborative learning environments. Quite frankly, we're not repartitioning the building. We're not changing the sizes of the classrooms. And we're not creating new or enhanced educational programming space. I sat in on a presentation that was done with educators, and there were these wonderful pictures showing collaborative workspaces, project areas, those kinds of unique collaborative spaces. That's not being done in this $49.9 million job. Next category, consolidation of spaces. Well, these all get zeros except for line item 2, utilization of space. I gave that a 2. It's not ideal. Probably the best utilization of space is in the other options that you will see. I think this is a very inefficient utilization of space. There's a lot of circulation area. You already know that. And it's difficult to change, quite frankly, in a maintain option. Again, strictly maintain. Building systems. We did spend a lot of time examining your mechanical, electrical systems, and our engineers identified the different heating systems that you have. You have these heating areas that are done by different boilers. You have a total of, I think, 3 boilers, 3 boiler rooms. We're not replacing all of them because the most recent one can be reused.
So mechanical system-wise, this is all replacement of equipment in kind. Anything that we felt still had 15 to 20 years of life in it, we maintained, and we'll show that as the deferred cost, escalated out. But we're not bringing these up to current fresh air standards, for instance, or energy efficient. They are better systems, but they're on the backbone of your current distribution, okay?
Yeah, we should clarify that too. So
They're not changing the engine in your car. We're rebuilding the engine that you have.
thank you. So think of your mechanical systems as the plants that make heat and the plants that make chilled material or media, whether it's air or water. And then you have the distribution system and the delivery system within the spaces. So we're not changing the distribution system. We're changing the basic mechanical units, so whether it's rooftop equipment or boilers. So I gave this a 1. So this diagram was prepared by our engineers. It shows the locations of boiler equipment. It just shows a photograph of some of the major mechanical equipment. So those components that should be replaced are being replaced as part of this budget. I gave that a 4. Most major mechanical components are replaced, but the existing distribution remains unchanged. The same thing is true for rooftop equipment. You have a lot of rooftop equipment on the roof, which is going to have to be replaced, and it should be timed when we are replacing the roof, so that's built into the budget. And then the next category is building envelope. Now, we examined the vintage of each of the roofs that you have in your building, and we did a chart here that shows the number of square feet you have for each vintage. We did not replace the roofs that are only a year old or 5 years old. We only replaced the older ones. So roughly, I think 16,000 square feet of roof is not being done as part of this option. However, that is a deferred cost that we identified later. However, we are doing, in addition to roof membrane replacement, where we are doing that, we're adding insulation at those roofs. So we are improving the insulation in those areas. We're cleaning all the exterior masonry. We're doing all of the masonry and stone restoration for the 1928 building. We're doing some repointing. We're replacing all of the single glazed windows with thermopane windows. We're replacing all of the failing window units.
Those are here in the media center and then the 28 building.
We did look at what it would take to add geothermal fields to this building or this site, and we know that we would need roughly 200 geothermal wells, 495 feet deep. That is not in the budget. That is not in the $49.9 million. Those are actually add-ons that we are going to be reporting in the other two options. We also looked at photovoltaics. We know how many photovoltaic panels would be required to provide the electricity for this plant. You would have to select certain areas of the roof. We'd also have to create carport structures to create the number of photovoltaic panels. But again, that's not in this budget. So under green design, this is that line item. I gave that a 0. Site work. Okay, so I'm going to ask Michael to walk us through the site because a fair amount of money is spent on the site.
It's about $3.5 million.
Thank you. Very good. Here you go.
So a lot of this is going to sound similar. There's improvements to Monteith, both the ingress and egress, not only making those both truly 2 lanes each, but also fortifying the shoulder with a real pedestrian sidewalk that could be mounted by emergency vehicles if need be. So this is a safety and circulation issue, and then continuing that all the way up to the front door of the building. Similar to the other scheme, the main parking lot has been rotated 90 degrees for all the good reasons that you heard. This is a bit of social programming to get students and even grown-up folks to follow the circulation line to this large pedestrian-friendly entryway that goes from the fields over to the main entrance. And you know, this is just good airport design, right? Gather all the people and bring them in all at once. So that is a safety issue as well. As part of fixing this loop, as you heard from the previous team, we went ahead and added parking. In rotating the parking, you do lose efficiency. So this not only makes up for that rotation, but adds a considerable amount more. Continuing on security, we too felt there was a need to get an additional curb cut onto the site, if only for emergency vehicles, and to create a loop road around the entire building. Right now, there's a pinch point behind the Tech Ed and Science Wing as the hill comes down. So we moved some of the water service and regraded that area. So this would be a gated area at the end of this town road spur that emergency vehicles could use to access the fields or to get around the entire site, the buildings if needed. There is accessibility improvements to this road here and a path to the press box here to make those ADA compliant. The all-in number for the site work, because the cost you're looking at is all of our alternates added together, adds a road from the library parking lot, which is about halfway up the hill, to the bus drop-off. And this, rather than occasional or construction access, would be a full-time permanent road to be used specifically early in the morning when the library is closed to give the buses more queuing space, and in the early afternoon before the library is really packed with elementary students or high school students to take that surge off of the pinch point you have here between students trying to leave the site in cars and leave in buses. So from a site improvement standpoint, the money that we spent here, we feel we spent well, or Richard felt we spent well. And he gave me all fours on this. So
This is my opinion.
I'm like his star student this quarter. I'm very excited. But all kidding aside, we addressed the traffic flow, the pedestrian safety, and the parking issue. We give you some parking back as part of this. All the athletic fields are 100% accessible. And getting the emergency vehicle access to those back fields is an improvement should something happen there. Mentioned the ADA compliance and the ADA improvements to the front of the building. And then the site layout, it's better flow, and it's got some pressure relief valves on you for the pinch points that you encounter in the mornings and the afternoon during your school day. Benefits to the community. I'm going to talk about this bundle right now by the auditorium and the locker rooms and the music area. What you see here is the existing condition: gym, the locker room, the music rooms, and the auditorium. I think we're all aware of the inaccessible seating issue, so we're tearing up the entire slab there and pouring a whole new slab through the entire auditorium to make it fully accessible. I think you're aware of the tight lobby situation you have when you do have a performance in the auditorium or a big game in the main gym. There's no surge space for you. There's no pre-function, post-function. There's no lobby. This bundle of your building is rife with accessibility issues. Everything that's highlighted in red has been flagged by NEASC as inaccessible, right? So all of these have to be addressed. There's a narrow hall here coming off of what there is of your lobby between the gym and the locker rooms. And this whole locker room suite is really adapted space. It is, this whole school has been adapted over time, right? You've backfilled just about every square foot. But when we looked at the problem of trying to meet your ed spec and not touch the exterior wall, we found that this locker room suite represented perhaps an area where you could get better utilization. And that comes from the fact that that locker room was built when high school students took showers together in large groups. Now, over time, you've appropriated those showers to be team rooms. But in reality, that may not be the highest use of that space, and it's certainly not the most efficient use of that space. So what we propose doing is, in addition to fixing the auditorium, if you're going to shut down the auditorium and jackhammer up the entire slab and close that thing down for 12 to 14 months, what you should really do is scoop out the non-compliant public restrooms that you have here and swing them over to here and create a real 10-foot wide hallway, right? oop, I revealed the end. And a real 10-foot wide hallway that pulls people that are attending a function here or attending a function here to a joint restroom, and then repack this new bar with 2020 locker rooms, the way students use them now, all right? If you need team rooms, you can put them there. We demolished a couple of your rooms in the corner of your cafeteria. You can find an office there to replace that space. This represents a small amount of reprogrammable space. At least you can build it purpose-suited, okay? But our thinking was, and we have the price to minimally make this accessible, but if you're going to go in there and jackhammer up all that plumbing to make it minimally accessible, you might as well take the time and try to repack it and do a good job. It's like when your kids are cleaning up their closet and they'll just keep packing it in and packing it in. Every now and again, you got to pull everything out, get rid of what you don't need, and put it together nicely. So that's the improvement there. And we agree with QA&M's conclusion that the volume of the auditorium, right, everything that touches the outside air is sufficient for a EdSpec compliant auditorium. It's just about reworking the ground floor. There's ample room within the existing structure to sling in a mezzanine, and you can get plenty of seats in there. And you create a nice public asset that actually has some elbow room should you have a big event in either the gym or the auditorium, or on the rare occasion that you may have simultaneous events. So that is, again, a small improvement, but we think it's money well spent given the amount of work that you're obligated to do just to meet the minimum.
I'm just going to give you just a 3-minute one.
Oh. So that's, so we improved that score to 2 for the community. And then the shelter in place, essentially the generator that you have now is the generator that we replaced for you, and there's no aggregate change as far as using this as a community shelter.
The last section here, before we get to cost by CS&G, fit and feel for Farmington. This is maybe the most difficult in this option to satisfy, because we're doing so little work in transforming the building. We're really doing a minimum maintenance project here. So as far as the internal design is concerned, there's really no change in internal design. So I gave that a 2. Exterior design or external design, well, we are doing significant improvements to that legacy building, the 1928 building. It will preserve this building for generations in the future, so I gave that a 3. But the other areas of the building, the exterior, were not really improving. Overall fit and feel for Farmington, I gave that a 3. I think the site gets improved, the 1928 building gets improved, and it's a good example of conservation of resources. Does that fit with Farmington? I think it does. Where I think it falls short is it does not look to the future. It does not create an image for present students about the possibilities for the future. So it's conservative, it's frugal. It does have a historic element, which there's a great deal of sentiment attached to it. And by the way, that cupola, the complete removal and reconstruction of that cupola is included in that number, because this has been cited as being a significant item of interest. So that is included. So I gave the overall fit and feel for Farmington a 3. You may choose to score it differently. The end. Oops. Cost.
Okay, thank you, Richard. So quickly, we'll go through, again, Taisu Kim's options for cost estimate of the maintained current facilities. The architectural design fee came in at $3.3 million. This was sort of a reduced or adjusted cost from their original fee structure because the original fee structure was based on about a $75 million number. That's what they worked at. Their proposals understood that this was coming in much lower than that, and had made a note that they would like to asterisk that number with final negotiations, that their fee would be reduced if this option was selected at that $49 million mark. The professional fees, again, coming in very similar to QA&M's numbers. Just to recap, the things that come up with the professional fees, again, the project management costs, the testing and inspections, hazmat, monitoring allowances, state permitting, any legal fees, bond orientation fees, et cetera, all roll up into that professional fees. The construction cost number at just under $30 million is their base number. What it actually takes to build this concept. There is, again, a design contingency that's rolled into this, along with the escalation fees and a construction contingency. The next item is the alternates. What you saw presented for alternates for site work and for the auditorium, thank you, roll out to just about $8.7 million. The furniture, equipment, and technology is the exact same number that we reported out for QA&M. Again, 50% for this option, about 50% of the furniture, furnishings, and technology. Again, a 5% owner contingency. That's 5% of that total project cost, and that rolls that number up to that $49,863,339. So again, taking that total project cost into play, putting it into our cost criteria matrix, less the state reimbursement of eligible costs, and working with Taisu Kim, they have made that recommendation that a smaller percentage of this particular scope of work would be allowable as eligible. We took 30% of that number, and the reimbursement costs came in just over $4 million. So you take that $4 million out of the total project cost, and you get a net project cost of $45,674,819. As you heard Richard share and Michael share about the additional capital expenditures that they carried a number of just $1.1 million. That covers the 16,000 square feet of roofing that was not, that is fairly new, and some of the boiler work, if I've got that correct. The the total projected cost over 20 years of the town share is $46,844,819.
So for this option, the tax impact to the average home assessed at $226,777 is $229.16 in year one. Costs will decrease by approximately $4.27 per year over 20 years.
So again, we'll open it up for about a 10-minute question and answer session to the committee. Richard, if you'd like to take the podium. Sure. Thanks.
I've got a quick question about the mechanical systems. You've spoken in the past about, and tonight, about the ability of just updating what is existing. What risks are associated with that in terms of using the conduits that flow through the building? You're updating the the boilers, and yet there is a transportation system that brings all of that from the boiler to wherever it needs to go.
Right.
Are those being replaced or refurbished, or are we using existing?
Well, we did have
structures?
conversations with the engineers and the cost estimator about that. There is a certain percentage of that to be replaced.
There's an allowance carried.
Here you go.
In the estimate. Hi, Mike. There's an allowance carried in the estimate, right, for the piping, for instance. The piping in the tunnels is the most conspicuous, I think, probably both teams fixated on that. And Richard wouldn't let me go in there to go look at them. But beyond that, where we feel that there's non-compliant sprinkler heads, there's an allowance for even replacing ceiling tile in those areas. So we've tried to capture, without drawing every little pipe fitting along the way, we've tried to capture the cost for that. And then lastly, there's contingencies to cover that. But, I mean, your question begs the overall piece, which was for the maintain option, which within our four walls of our office, I was in charge to champion. I wanted this to come in even lower, right? That was my job on this option. It is just a replacement in kind. And that gets you out of a lot of other things that you would have to do if you were trying to update the system and bring it up to codes, okay? It's not irresponsible, right? We're completely rebuilding your engine, okay? We're just not putting a hybrid engine in your car, okay?
So we've eliminated any risks associated with using existing components that wouldn't be replaced.
We have not eliminated that risk. We have tried to be responsible in accounting for that risk within this estimate. And we worked very hard with CSG and the cost estimator and our engineers who were very conservative on this to make sure that we felt good about that number that we brought forward.
Yeah, that actually was one of the very first questions from our engineers. So you're not obligated to change the whole system. Which direction should they take? Should they take replace in kind, knowing we're not going to be insulating walls? We're going to be, so why do you want to have such a high-powered mechanical system when, in fact, you're not even insulating the walls? So their strategy was, their question to us was, which approach should they take? Should they replace in kind, which is something you can do, or do you tear everything out, build new systems, and new distribution? Remember, you have services that come into this building at different points. This was something that we pointed out before. In a new build scenario, you would have only one service entrance. So what do you do in a maintain option? Do you tear out all of those incoming services? We chose not to do that. It was a more conservative approach. I believe there was a question back there.
Was there an elevator in the old building?
There is currently an elevator in the 1929 building. This estimate includes refurbishing that elevator. We do provide a new elevator to the mezzanine by the auditorium.
Yes.
Richard, the NEASC report cites for inaccessible spaces, among other places, the gym. And I don't think it's addressed in this proposal. If it were, would you see a reduction in seating capacity in the gymnasium?
That's a minimal reduction in seating. The estimate does include all new accessible bleachers in the gym. The scope of work, as QA&M pointed out, for the gyms is actually relatively minimal if you're just trying to satisfy NEASC. So it's essentially new installation of mechanical systems that service them and a new bleacher system. You would lose a few seats, a portion, because I'm sure you've seen this in other schools. The bleachers have cutouts to accommodate wheelchairs. It would not meet your current ed spec of fitting 1,400 students, which I think is an appreciable target.
Otherwise speechless, I see.
Any other questions from the
Just a
committee?
comment.
Yeah.
From where I'm sitting, I think that, the exercise that you took looking at just the strict maintain is a question this community has had, for the last few years. What if we just fix what we have to? And I just want to thank you for, give us a lot of detail on, how the costs are being spent and what areas they're being spent and how much money is actually involved in just doing the strict necessary. So thank you.
Yep.
It's an important aspect in understanding option one in the suite of the three options.
I have a question, and maybe CSG would be the person to answer this. In each of these schemes that we've heard tonight, do you have a sense of the scope of hazmat issues that would potentially be present with either one of these options?
I'll do it.
Yeah, good.
Like I said, I was really charged with making this maintain option work. So there is an existing hazmat report. And not speaking for QA&M, but I'm sure they took a similar approach. Wherever we touch something that was contaminated, we made good on that, and that abatement is included in the scope. In some areas, curiously enough, the 600 wing, who knew? Most of you have trouble envisioning where the 600 wing is. But when we looked at the amount of demolition, it actually made sense to go in there and abate that whole area. So we went ahead and threw that in. The 1929 building, the oldest building, and most susceptible perhaps for having icky, sticky stuff you don't want to touch, is actually fairly encapsulated. So that too was targeted abatement. We did not create the assignment of fixing problems that we weren't going to disturb within this limited scope. Okay? So that's another important distinction, and sort of forewarning you, should you ever decide to tear up the carpet in the 1929 building, you may be beholden to other tasks.
Sorry.
Works better this way.
Yeah. So to answer the rest of your question, conversely with QAM, they've abated the entire building.
Okay.
So
Should we consider, as you're saying, there may be a need to address an area like the carpet
No,
in the future?
Yeah, you have to understand I would ask you to consider the position that we're taking in identifying, if even as an exercise,
Yeah.
What this scope entails. And, if you've ever worked on an old car, you don't necessarily go ripping out stuff that is working okay right now.
Right.
And you just take the swing that is prudent to get you to the finish line that you've established. And on this one, you asked us to give you a 20-year life.
Right.
And what we see moving forward in the 1929 building is we don't see a need for you to necessarily go out and abate it. You could always just put new carpet down. You could do that.
On top of existing?
So
the reason I'm asking that is that a piece that you added in the contingency of things that aren't inside the scope of the 49 million, or are you just not touching that as you take that approach? That
you would just have to continue to replace in kind.
Okay.
Right. Would be the idea moving forward, and I just presume from the finish boards that the other team repainted everything they touched. We didn't repaint stuff that we didn't touch, and nor did we give you a cost for a gallon of paint 20 years out.
Okay.
Because that, in our mind, comes out of a CIP operation. I'm not trying to be difficult.
No, you're not difficult.
I want to be very clear on what that price tag includes.
And if I'm trying to infer from what you're saying is that with the other proposal, you've addressed hazmat issues throughout the building. In the future, should we ever have to address any other envelope issues or issues that need to be touched, we'd have to go and look at those hazmat issues in the future.
Right.
So it's not, we're not addressing them in this. They sit unattended because we took a position that in a maintenance thing, we didn't need to attend to them right now.
Correct.
But they do still sit out there in the future.
They do. So, as I said in the beginning, seeing both approaches is very illuminating.
Yeah. The other question is a cost one that I think we talked about, and it might not be something we presented tonight, but it related to the ongoing maintenance and energy costs. And I don't know if are we doing those estimates at the end of all of this, all three?
Yes.
Okay. Because I'm assuming there would be different ongoing energy costs with the first proposal versus the second proposal. And that would affect overall cost of the town.
Cost piece is in process at this point and will be part of the final conversation for all options.
Thank you.
I would just point out, in replacing with in kind, we're not changing your utility performance. We're
Right.
modestly improving it by adding insulation and better windows around the building, but we're not dropping it, but we're not air conditioning the whole building either.
Any other questions from the committee? All right, excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Hold on. Getting used to our microphones. Just a few notes before I open it back up for public comment. So I was just informed that all presentation material that you've seen tonight is already up on the website for people to review. So I know some of those numbers, it's difficult to present all that. Please go out and take a look so that you can kind of reinforce the information that you heard tonight. So that's important to remember. Again, I just want to remind everybody, once public comment is done, we are going to go into executive session. So at that point, again, it will only be committee members and CSG at that point. And again, reiterate, at no point are we going to come out with any kind of recommendation at this time. We still have a lot more information to hear. We hope to see this many people, if not more, moving forward in our additional presentations. And just for an overall timeline, when I keep talking about this final recommendation, right now we are scheduling that to happen in our January 29th meeting. So just keep that in mind. That's the week following our last presentation. So if you want to keep that in your scheduling, we'll keep communicating that as well. It'll be out there on Facebook. It'll be out on the website. It'll be everywhere. It's even on the sign out front. Did everybody notice? It's on the scrolling sign. So we'll keep doing that as well. And I think that's it as far as before we move into public comment. So at this time, I would like to open the floor up to public comment based on anything that you've heard so far in the meeting.
Hi, sorry to make your evening a little bit longer, but I just wanted to talk about something that I feel is very important. My name is Mark Hoffman, 22 Greenwoods Lane, Farmington. So I wanted to talk about something that I care very deeply about. I am a partial representative of a team here at Farmington High School that donates almost 5,000 hours of community service. We give back hundreds of hours to elementary school students, mentoring them in their particular field. And participation in this organization exposes them to over $80 million in scholarship opportunities, including education, places like the University of Hartford that gives $10,000 scholarships for participation in this high school activity. And unfortunately, currently, this team is off-site. What I'm talking about is our robotics team. Our robotics team this year consists of 75 students, and they are currently having their meetings at the Alternative Center. They do their meetings there, plus they do all of their building of their robot there. and we're very grateful to have that space. However, the Farmington robotics team is actually decorated at the regional level, and they compete at the world level, and they really need a space here at the high school to feel welcome as part of the community. I did a little quick calculation, and the students going back and forth from the high school to the Alternative Center spend about 1,000 hours of their time going back and forth if you count every single person's time equally. Think about how much more that robotics team could do with those 1,000 hours back. So there's a whole bunch of other stuff that you could consider, like budgets. We can certainly share with building materials and building supplies and tools and all that kind of stuff. But what I really think is important is how much this team gives back to the community at large, and how much more we could do if we were here at the high school. So I hope that all the other proposals pull that robotics team into the high school so that we are here fully in the community. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Inez St. James from 11 Brightwood Road in Unionville. And wow, the presentations were so different. Just a little overwhelmed right now. But I'm also the president of Friends of Music, a parent organization here at the high school. I was, of course, very happy to hear about the auditorium, music rooms being addressed, and the serious ADA issues that we have. I didn't hear about, except from the first group, the acoustic issues are huge. I don't know if you've been to any of our concerts, but those are seriously lacking. And we don't have enough space for our instruments. And I'm not so sure if either of these options were providing for that. The air and ventilation issues, obviously they're important to our kids, but we have instruments that are separating at the seams because of the ventilation issues that we have. Instruments are expensive. Let's see. I'm extremely proud of our music program. We have about 525 students out of about 1,300 participating in the music program. Every spring, we give awards to seniors. 80% of those kids are part of the music program. It's a big deal. I'm just a little bit concerned about this maintenance option and the impact it will have, not having auditorium and just the construction impact. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jamie Moses. I live at 33 High Street. We're neighbors with Michael. Thank you. And as a very impassioned, I love it. That's great. I'm here to more of a suggestion than anything else. One of the things that I find helpful is getting things in context. And so I think it would be helpful for the town, for the community, for all of us to understand, I guess, the context of the numbers that we're looking at. So you hear numbers 50 million, 100 million, and it's really hard to understand whether I should be happy about that or sad about that or know or don't know, right? Because I don't know. And so I think it would be helpful if we could communicate to the town and to the voters in a way that describes sort of, like I just did some quick analysis. I looked online and I don't know if what I was looking at was real or not, or fake news, or who knows, right? It could have been anything. But you look at, okay, how much square footage per pupil do we need, or what is the average, right, of in the Northeast or nationally or in Connecticut or wherever? And then how much does it cost per square foot in order to build a facility or to maintain a facility or to, for these options? And so when I start to look at those things, it gives me a context around trying to figure out if what we have is a good proposal, decent proposal, how this all works. And again, not impugning anybody's integrity, right? That's not the point here. It's that if the more communication about averages and medians and things like that where we can put in context of, okay, so we need to have 180 square feet per pupil and that we need 1,200 or 1,500 people because the town's growing or it's shrinking or whatever. And then if we just multiply that by what we think the average cost per square foot is nationally in the Northeast, in Connecticut, wherever, that gives us a much bigger context to understand what these numbers are. Because I think everybody agrees we need to do something, but without having that context, it's hard to know where we stand on it. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
I'll be real quick. What I wanted to talk about again, and I think I talk about this every time I come, is the history of Farmington and the projects that we've had here. Although both of these options I thought were incredibly well done, and I thank the committee for having these presented to the town, because I think that's important to see those, to see what it means to just maintain what we have, although I really appreciate how you addressed the auditorium. I'd like to remind everyone that we find ourselves here after adding on to this building numerous times. Excuse me, I have a cold. Each time not addressing all the needs that we were aware of with each building committee for each addition. That was done to keep the costs down, but here we are, again, needing to spend more money on this terribly outdated building. Thank God we have the administrators and teachers and students that we have in this building that continue to put us in the news. The history of our projects in the town of Farmington and the opportunities we had to do more, other than the Westwood School, although that did take 3 tries on that property, has cost us dearly. It's cost all of the taxpayers in this town dearly. I look forward personally to the other options that will be presented over the next 2 weeks, and I thank the committee again for having those available to us. Hopefully in those options we'll see some collaborative space, because that's what we're doing with our students today. And we all pay attention to the needs of this building, other than continuing to put Band-Aids, and I think we're 27, 28 doors, which we'd probably need if we do one more addition, at least a few more. I hope we can pay attention to that and stop Band-Aiding this building, because everybody in this building deserves a lot more. Thank you.
For any last minute. No? Okay. So at this time, first of all, I'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight. We really, really appreciate the engagement, and we know it's hard. The scheduling is hard for everybody. And just so everybody also, one thing I didn't mention before is we are planning a community meeting on a Saturday as well. It would be a Saturday morning, kind of an open house event over 3 hours, where you would be able to drop in and hear more about these options before that January 29th meeting that I talked about, where the recommendation is going to happen. So there is additional opportunities, again, if if the timing works better for people. So keep that in mind. You'll hear more from us about that. But again, thank you for your participation. At this time, as I mentioned, we are going to actually have a motion to move into executive session with the committee members and owners' reps only. But we look forward to seeing everybody at the meeting next week as well. All right, so for the committee members, can I get a motion to adjourn to executive session to review and discuss the presentations as we heard tonight? And this is pursuant to Connecticut General Statute Section 1-206 and 1-200B24.
So moved. Seconded.
All right, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we will enter executive session. We'll give it a few minutes, let's say 9:15.